Right now, as you watch this video, the global economy is standing on the edge of a cliff. Over the last 48 hours, the United States military has executed its sixth consecutive night of major airstrikes across Iranian territory, deploying fighter jets, drones, and warships. They are not just hitting military bases, they are systematically dismantling vital infrastructure, destroying bridges in Bandar-e-Kamir, striking the Chabahar port on the Gulf of Oman, and crippling coastal logistics hubs. In retaliation, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has launched a massive wave of ballistic missiles and suicide drones, explicitly targeting U.S. military assets in Qatar and Jordan, and plunging the entire region into chaos. But this is not just another distant geopolitical skirmish. This explosion of violence is happening right on the doorstep of the Strait of Hormuz. Before this conflict erupted, an average of 130 commercial ships passed through this narrow choke point every single day, carrying roughly 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil. Today, that traffic has effectively vanished. Over 6,000 seafarers are currently stranded aboard hundreds of vessels, caught in the crossfire of a renewed naval blockade. The United States has aggressively boarded ships, including the MT Wen Yao, using U.S. Marines to enforce compliance. If this vital artery remains severed, the shockwaves will not just hit Wall Street, they will hit your wallet. We are looking at a catastrophic disruption of global supply chains that could trigger rampant inflation, spike energy costs across the United States, and completely alter the balance of global power. Today, we are going deep inside the July 2026 U.S.-Iran war, the fight for the Strait of Hormuz, and why the fallout could shatter the global economy. To understand why this specific stretch of water dictates the fate of the global economy, we have to look at the math. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Look at the geography. At its narrowest, the strait is only 21 miles wide. But because the waters are dangerously shallow, the actual navigable shipping lanes are just 2 miles wide in either direction, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. This creates an incredibly tight bottleneck. Through those 2-mile lanes flows the lifeblood of modern civilization. We are talking about tens of millions of barrels of crude oil and massive quantities of liquefied natural gas every single day. Before the hostilities broke out, this maritime superhighway facilitated the transit of essential energy supplies that dictate the operational costs for nearly every major corporation on Earth. When oil prices fluctuate, it immediately alters the behavioral psychology of global markets. Investors panic, shipping costs skyrocket, and the price of manufacturing practically everything, from the plastic in your smartphone to the fertilizer used to grow your food, goes up. This is why Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency, issued a stark warning this week. He stated bluntly that if the United States and Iran do not resolve this standoff and restore the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, soon the entire world should be deeply worried about its energy security. This is not just a matter of energy, it is a matter of grand corporate rivalry and economic survival. When a choke point like this closes, companies are forced to reroute their entire supply chains around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. This adds weeks to delivery times and burns millions of dollars in extra fuel per voyage. The shipping industry is already being pushed to the brink, and the resulting cost increases are always passed directly down to the consumer. How did we get to this breaking point? Just 1 month ago, in mid-June, there was a glimmer of hope. Iran and the United States had signed a fragile 14-point memorandum of understanding aimed at securing a ceasefire and reopening the strait to global shipping. Traffic began to slowly recover, but that diplomatic breakthrough collapsed completely. The underlying strategic deadlock proved impossible to solve. Washington demanded leverage, and Tehran refused to negotiate under duress. The turning point came when U.S. President Donald Trump formally notified Congress that hostilities against Iran had resumed, opening a new 60-day window for military action. In a highly controversial move that sent shockwaves through international markets, the administration announced the reinstatement of a total blockade on Iranian ports. But the U.S. went even further. In an attempt to force the issue and ostensibly cover the costs of keeping the waterway open, the administration threatened to slap a massive 20% transit fee on all cargo shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. The international backlash was instantaneous. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva condemned the proposed transit fee as outright piracy. European logistics giants, like Germany's Hapag-Lloyd, warned that imposing fees in international waters would severely disrupt global maritime law. Although the U.S. later walked back the direct toll threat in favor of regional trade deals, the damage to market confidence was already done. The military reality on the ground escalated just as fast. The U.S. Navy, operating under CENTCOM, began aggressively enforcing the blockade. They deployed one-way attack sea drones in combat for the first time against the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. U.S. aircraft fired on and disabled an unladen oil tanker that attempted to break the quarantine, and U.S. Marines physically boarded commercial vessels in the Gulf of Oman to ensure compliance. The message from Washington was clear. This is a campaign of absolute maximum pressure. By systematically degrading Iran's coastal military infrastructure and choking off its maritime logistics, the U.S. intends to force Tehran into accepting highly unfavorable terms. But Iran is not backing down. Tehran views any compliance under this extreme military duress as a total strategic capitulation. Iran's parliament speaker has outright classified the ongoing conflict as an existential war, declaring that Iranian forces now have complete freedom of action. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has made their strategy terrifyingly clear. If the United States continues to strike Iranian soil, Iran will export the destruction to every U.S. ally in the region, and they have made good on that threat. As U.S. airstrikes collapsed a tower at the Chabahar port and destroyed critical bridges in southern Iran to cripple supply routes, Tehran retaliated with a ferocity that caught many by surprise. The Revolutionary Guards launched ballistic missiles and drones at a U.S. airbase in Jordan, claiming the attack was meant to punish the aggressor following an earlier American strike near a civilian hospital. In Kuwait, authorities reported that a swarm of over 30 Iranian unmanned aerial vehicles caused substantial damage to vital installations. Radar systems and military aircraft stationed in Qatar were targeted in what the IRGC described as a heavy and surprise attack. This is a classic asymmetrical warfare strategy. Iran knows it cannot defeat the U.S. Navy in a direct conventional sea battle, but by leveraging its massive inventory of drones and cruise missiles, Iran can inflict severe economic and psychological damage on the regional host nations that allow the U.S. military to operate from their territory. The goal is to pressure countries like Kuwait and Jordan into forcing Washington to halt its offensive operations. The commander of the aerospace force in Iran's Revolutionary Guards has publicly vowed that the retaliation will not stop until the U.S. completely ceases its attacks on Iran's southern coastline and ends the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It is a brutal, high-stakes game of chicken, and neither side is blinking. So, what does this mean for the average person living in the United States or Europe? Why should you care about a destroyed bridge in Bandar-e-Kamir or a boarded ship in the Gulf of Oman? Because the global economy is a tightly wound machine, and the Strait of Hormuz is its most sensitive gear. The immediate casualty of this war is maritime certainty. The logistics sector relies entirely on predictability. When a war zone erupts in a critical transit point, ship owners and shippers are forced to completely recalculate their risk matrices. War risk premiums for maritime insurance are currently skyrocketing. Every single vessel that braves the waters near the Persian Gulf is now paying heavily inflated insurance rates. These massive extra costs do not just disappear, they are absorbed into the global supply chain and ultimately passed on to the consumer. We are already seeing the initial shockwaves. Following the renewed hostilities, U.S. gas prices began edging up immediately. Diesel has topped $5 a gallon in many areas, while regular gas is climbing, hitting levels nearly $1.25 higher than they were just a year ago. When energy transportation costs rise, it fuels inflationary pressure across virtually every sector of the economy. It is not just the gas in your car. It costs more to power the factories that manufacture goods, and it costs more to transport those goods on trucks and trains to your local store. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the WTO have all warned that while the global economy has been broadly resilient, the uncertainty over the conflict's economic fallout is creating a massive drag on global growth. For the U.S. audience, this could mean a harsh return to the rampant inflation seen in recent years, stalling out any hopes of interest rate cuts and deeply impacting everyday household budgets. The July 2026 escalation in the Strait of Hormuz is more than just a flare-up. It is a fundamental shift in the global order. Iranian military leadership has warned that the maritime security architecture of the Persian Gulf has been permanently altered. We are no longer looking at a quick diplomatic fix. We are staring down a protracted campaign of attrition. Washington is demanding unconditional negotiations under the crushing weight of a military blockade. Tehran is demanding a complete cessation of hostilities and total sanctions relief before they will even consider returning to the table. As long as this strategic deadlock persists, the world will have to adapt to a new, terrifying reality. The $10 trillion choke point is closed for business, and the economic aftershocks are only just beginning. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand exactly how global events are impacting your life and your wallet, hit that subscribe button. We will continue to track this crisis as it unfolds. Until next time, stay informed.